Over the past few weeks, I've been playing through some great underwater-based games, Abzu and Song of the Deep, and they got me reminiscing about all the great music featured on NES games for water-based levels. And even though copyright is a bit out of control on YouTube nowadays, I figured I'd do something a little bit different this week and count down my favorite songs based on water levels from NES games. Now, it doesn't mean that the level is completely underwater, but it has to be water-based in some way, shape, or form. Well, without further ado, let's count them down. My absolute favorite NES songs that come from water-based levels. I've talked about Little Nemo quite a bit before, and it is one of my favorite NES games. The Night Sea level is definitely one of my favorites. After one of the toughest levels in the game in level 3, the train-themed toy level, the go into the Night Sea was definitely a welcomed change of pace, and because of that, it's always become one of my favorite songs. While it never received an official release in North America, at least during the NES days, Final Fantasy III, once I finally got a chance to play a translated version of it, quickly became one of my favorites in the series. I love the job system, and it's one of the reasons why I love Final Fantasy V as well. And there are a few areas in the game that have a water theme to them, but one of my absolute favorite songs is the song that's featured once you get control of the submarine and start going into the depths of the water. An absolute underrated gem for the NES, Dragon Fighter is both underrated for not only its action gameplay, but also for its soundtrack. From Sofel, the developer that also brought us Casino Kid and Wall Street Kid. And while I like both of those games for what they are, nothing compares to Dragon Fighter, and it's a fantastic game that unfortunately has not only gone under the radar, but also now has skyrocketed in price. It all has great music, but the Underwater Palace theme is particularly great. I'm probably going to kick myself for including it here on this list because of the way Nintendo is nowadays, but Kirbys Adventure is one of my absolute favorite platformers for the system, and it has great music to go along with the entire game, but one of my favorite songs definitely is the open water theme that plays during some of the more water-based levels throughout the course of the game. Almost all of the classic Mega Man games feature an underwater-based robot master, and I love most of the music that goes along with all of those stages, but two in particular really stood out, and the first one to make this list is Centaur Man from Mega Man 6. Mega Man 6 is one of my favorites in the series, and one of the main reasons for it is the soundtrack. You may think Centaur Man may not be an underwater-based robot boss, but once you play his level, you realize that, yeah, most of his level ends up taking place underwater, and why it ends up making this countdown. It's no secret that I love Sunsoft games, and one of the main reasons I do is the soundtracks have always been fantastic. They go along with the fun, yet sometimes difficult and challenging action gameplay, and one of the best examples of this is Blaster Master. While a lot of the music may not have been heard by a lot of gamers back in the day because they were never able to make it past the first few levels, but if you ever made it to level 5, the underwater theme is one of my absolute favorites. The second of the Mega Man-based songs to make it onto this list is from one of the all-time greatest soundtracks the NES ever produced in Mega Man 2. And of course, I'm talking about Bubble Man making this countdown. It may not be the best song on the soundtrack, but Bubble Man's theme is still a great song and one of my favorites from any of the classic Mega Man titles. One of my favorite NES titles that I don't get to talk about very often is The Fantastic Adventures of Dizzy. It's an extremely difficult and sometimes cryptic game to figure out what you need to do in order to find all the stars and be able to actually complete the game. It has some good music. Codemasters has that unique sound to their games overall in the system, and the underwater themed stage for Dizzy is absolutely one of my favorites. Absolutely one of the toughest games ever produced for the NES is Silver Surfer, an extremely unforgiving shooter that for many people they never completed one single level of. But if you jumped into Reptiles stage first, you got to hear one of the best songs that the NES produced, and since most of this level is featured underwater or in water, I figured it'd be perfect for this countdown. Before I get to number 1, I want to look at a couple of honorable mentions. DuckTales 2 is seen as an inferior sequel, including not only the gameplay, but the soundtrack in particular, but I actually dig a lot of the music. And there are a few stages in the game that have water in the level, but no level in particular is really completely underwater by any means. But the Bermuda theme, the level based on the Bermuda Triangle, I figured would be a little bit fitting to at least get an honorable mention here. Another Disney Capcom game that I love, Adventures in the Magic Kingdom, which had all levels based on rides from Disney World, featured a level based on Pirates of the Caribbean. Of course, pirates, there's some water in the level itself, and I absolutely love the song that goes along with it, so I want to include it here. I'm sensing a theme to these honorable mentions. Might as well keep it going. Little Mermaid is, of course, completely underwater and ocean-based, so I couldn't technically include almost every song from the soundtrack on this list. But the song that really always stood out to me was the song that plays during the opening prologue segment. It was a bit different from a lot of the other music featured in the game, and while I do enjoy the entire soundtrack, this song in particular was one of my favorites. One of my first fandom growing up was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, so that means I had to get a hold of the first TMNT game for the NES. And any kid that grew up playing that game probably has a lot of fond memories, but maybe even more so frustrating memories, especially when it came to the second level's ending, the dam. Swimming through the dam and trying to defuse all the bombs while dealing with the electric seaweed was one of the most challenging experiences I had played up to that point in my young gaming life. But when you go back and just listen to the song that accompanied that part, not only will nostalgia flood back to you, but you also realize it's one of the best songs on the NES. So there you have it, my 10 favorite underwater or water-based level themes for the NES. Let me know in the comments down below which ones that you loved, or maybe which ones I didn't include that I should definitely check out, or maybe I just forgot. There are so many great soundtracks for the NES, I'm sure I missed quite a few when making this list. Also be sure to let me know if there's any other music-based countdowns you would like to see me cover in the future. But anyway guys, I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.